My wife's affair with her boss, who owes us $200, $0 in a failed business deal, led to her forging my signature on a property deed worth $850, $0. Now she's suing me for half the house after I uncovered the betrayal. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to catch his wife cheating on him, especially not in a way that would blow up everything we had. But I did. And it was the kind of blow that leaves you questioning everything: yourself, your marriage, your whole damn life. And it all started with a gut feeling that something was off, then quickly spiraled into a world I never expected to be part of. Her name was Lisa. We'd been married for 7 years, and honestly, I thought we had a pretty good thing going. She was smart, beautiful, and funny, at least. That's what I used to think. But over the past few months, I started noticing little things. She was more secretive with her phone, hiding it when I came into the room. She'd leave her emails open on her laptop, then quickly close them when I got close. She seemed distracted, distant even, though she'd brush it off with some lame excuse about work stress. I bought it at first, but then I caught her lying about her schedule more than once. One night I decided to confront her. I was tired of feeling like I was walking on eggshells, tired of feeling like I was missing pieces of the puzzle. I waited until she was in the shower, then snuck into her phone. I figured maybe I'd find some harmless text from her friends or something. Instead, what I found made my stomach drop. There were dozens of messages between her and her boss, Mark, and they weren't just professional. They were flirty, sometimes borderline explicit. They talked about meeting up, sneaking around, and even getting more private. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the messages. Lisa had been lying to me for months, and worse, she was cheating with someone who owed us a ton of money. Mark was a scumbag, a guy who owed us $200, $0 in a failed business deal. We'd been struggling to keep our heads above water, and now I found out Lisa was screwing him, probably to get some kind of payoff or just because she liked the thrill. I confronted her that same night. When I showed her the messages, her face twisted into a sneer. "You're overreacting," she spat. "It's just work stuff, you're paranoid. Mark and I are just friends. You're crazy if you think anything else is going on." Her tone was dismissive, bitchy even. She insisted I was imagining things, that I was insecure, that I had no proof. But I had screenshots, I had her own words. I was furious but also numb. How could she lie so effortlessly? How could she betray me like this, especially with someone who was already in deep shit with us? The most shocking part wasn't just the affair itself, but what I discovered after. As I dug deeper, I found out that Lisa had forged my signature on a property deed. A house worth $850, $0, our family home, the one we'd built our lives in. She did it behind my back, claiming I approved it. She was planning to sue me for half the house after I uncovered her betrayal. That's when I realized this wasn't just a matter of cheating. It was a full-blown scheme to take everything I had. I was stunned, hurt, and mad as hell. I couldn't believe I'd been played like a fool. All those late nights, all the plans for our future gone. I felt betrayed on every level, not just as a husband, but as a man who thought he could trust his wife. That night I sat alone in the dark, trying to process how everything had fallen apart so quickly. My mind kept circling back to one thing: how do I fight back? How do I get justice for what she's done? And most importantly, how do I pick up the pieces when I feel so broken inside? The next few days were a blur. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My mind kept racing over everything I had uncovered. The fact that Lisa had been sneaking around with Mark, someone who owed us a massive debt, made everything feel more personal. It wasn't just the betrayal of the marriage. It was the betrayal of trust, of everything I thought our life was built on. And then there was the house. I found out she forged my signature on that deed. She'd been planning to take half of what I worked for, claiming I was on board with it all. I knew I had to do something. Sitting around feeling sorry for myself wasn't going to fix anything. I decided I'd start by gathering evidence. I needed proof of her lies, her deception, and her schemes. I hired a private investigator. I wanted to know exactly how deep this rabbit hole went. Over the next couple of weeks, the pie dug up more dirt. He confirmed Lisa had been in contact with Mark almost daily, even meeting up in secret. He also tracked her bank accounts, revealing she'd been withdrawing large sums of money, probably to fund her side deals or pay off Mark's debts. Meanwhile, I started to realize how much this was affecting me emotionally. I've been a stable guy, the kind who believed in honesty and loyalty. Now, I felt like a fool. I kept asking myself how I missed all these signs, how I was so blind to her true character. I felt humiliated, angry, and betrayed. Every time I looked at her, I saw a stranger. The woman I married was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. She lied so effortlessly, spun stories about her work trips, urgent meetings, and stress. It was all bullshit. She was sleeping around, scheming to take what wasn't hers. One night I decided I couldn't keep this bottled up anymore. I called her into the living room. Her face was smug, like she thought she was going to spin some more bullshit. I laid out everything I knew about her affair, the forged deed, the money she was trying to steal. She sneered at me, rolled her eyes, and said, "You're overreacting. You always do this when I have a normal day. You're just insecure because I work hard and I deserve some fun." That was her usual line, trying to make it sound like I was the problem, like I was paranoid for catching her. I told her I wasn't going to stand for it anymore. I told her I knew about the affair, the forgery, everything. Her reaction was priceless. She looked genuinely surprised, then started crying fake tears. "You don't understand, I was stressed about the business. Mark helped me, he's been there for me. It's nothing serious," she said, brushing it off like she was doing me a favor by confessing. I knew better. I knew she'd been lying all along. Her excuses made me angrier. She said she loved me, that she was just weak, that it was a mistake. But I wasn't buying it. I'd been with her long enough to see through her bullshit. I realized that her version of stress was just an excuse to cheat, to lie, to manipulate. And her version of love was just a way to keep me around while she did whatever the hell she wanted. That moment marked the beginning of the emotional I didn't see coming. I felt betrayed, yes, but also embarrassed. How could I let myself be so blind? How could I trust someone who'd lie so easily? And then came the anger, pure, unfiltered rage at her betrayal, at Mark for being such a scumbag, and at myself for not seeing it sooner. I kept thinking about everything I'd worked for, our house, our savings, our plans, and how she was planning to take half of it all. It was like a punch to the stomach every time I thought about it. I knew I had to act fast. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I started talking to a lawyer about what my options were. I also reached out to a friend who was a financial advisor, just to get a sense of how much damage she could do with the forged deed and the money she'd already taken. The more I learned, the clearer it became that I was dealing with someone who was willing to burn everything down to get what she wanted. And I was the one left holding the pieces. The hardest part was realizing I had to prepare myself for the worst. I didn't know if she'd try to take the house, or if she'd try to spin some story to turn the legal system against me. But I knew I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. I had to fight. Not just for my property, but for my dignity. The betrayal cut deep, and I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything. I was ready to confront her again, to push back, and to do whatever it took to stop her from destroying what little stability I had left. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I threw myself into gathering every piece of evidence I could find. I reviewed bank statements, emails, text messages, anything that could prove her deception. I also made copies of the forged property deed which I had obtained through my lawyer. The more I dug, the more I realized how calculated her moves had been. She had been planning this for months, maybe even longer. It was like I was waking up from a nightmare I never knew I'd been in. Meanwhile, Lisa's behavior was getting even more bitchy and manipulative. She started gaslighting me, telling me I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, that I was crazy for accusing her of cheating. She insisted she loved me, but her actions told a different story. She was still sneaking around, still lying, still scheming. Every time I confronted her, she'd cry, complain about how stressed she was, how unfair I was being. But I saw right through her. Her tears were fake, just another act to keep me off balance. One night, I decided I'd have enough. I sat her down and laid everything out in front of her: screenshots, bank records, the forged deed, the Pi's reports. I told her I knew about her affair with Mark, that I knew she'd been lying about everything. Her face twisted into a sneer. "You're just jealous because Mark is successful and you're not," she said. "This has nothing to do with love or loyalty. I was just trying to get out of our shitty financial mess. Mark's the only one who's ever helped us." That was her explanation, blaming me, framing her affair as some kind of desperate act to save us. I didn't buy it. I told her she was a liar and a cheat, that I was done playing her game. I told her I had already spoken to my lawyer, and that I was going to file for divorce and also take legal action over the house and the forgery. She looked at me like I was crazy, then started yelling, calling me a control freak, saying I was ruining everything. But I'd had enough. I knew what I had to do. I was prepared for her to fight dirty, but what I didn't expect was her to escalate things even further. The very next day, I got a call from my lawyer. Lisa had filed a lawsuit, claiming she was entitled to half the house because she supposedly contributed to it, even though she forged my signature. She was trying to spin this narrative that I was the bad guy, that I was trying to cheat her out of her fair share. The lawyer told me she had also hired her own attorney and that this was going to get ugly fast. That's when I realized how deep her manipulation went. She wasn't just cheating on me, she was trying to take everything I had built. She was planning to use the legal system to her advantage to screw me over. I felt a mix of rage and despair. How could someone you loved do this? How could she lie so easily? It was like my entire world was collapsing around me. I decided I couldn't just sit back and let her win. I had to fight back with everything I had. I started reviewing the law, talking to my lawyer about counteractions. I knew that if I didn't act quickly, she could succeed in her scheme. I also contacted the bank and my financial advisor to freeze any accounts or transfers that looked suspicious. I was determined not to let her drain me dry or walk away with half my life savings in the house. But even as I prepared for the legal battle ahead, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. The woman I married, the woman I loved, was now a stranger who had betrayed me in the worst way. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I didn't see her true nature sooner. The pain was sharp, but I told myself I had to stay strong, for me, for the truth, and for whatever was left of my dignity. I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot, but I also knew I wasn't going down without a fight. The legal battle was a nightmare from the start. Lisa's lawyer was aggressive, throwing everything she could at me, claims about contributions to the house, the supposed joint effort to build our life, even twisting the forged deed into some kind of mutual mistake. It was clear she was trying to use every trick in the book to get half of everything, including the house I had worked so hard for. Meanwhile, I was doing everything I could to prepare my case, gathering witnesses, documents, and expert opinions to prove her forgery and her affair with Mark. The emotional toll was heavy. Every day felt like walking through a minefield. I'd wake up angry, then sink into despair. I kept replaying her lies, her sneers, her fake tears. I'd never felt so betrayed in my life. Honestly, I felt like I'd been punched repeatedly. I'd trusted her with everything, our finances, our future, and she'd spent months planning to steal it all from under my nose. It was a brutal blow to my ego, my trust, and my sense of security. One particular moment hit me hard. I found out she'd been secretly meeting with Mark even after I'd confronted her. It wasn't just a fling. It was a full-blown affair, probably going on the entire time she was pretending to be stressed, overworked, or whatever bullshit she was feeding me. I saw the messages, the hotel receipts, even a photo of them together at a fancy restaurant. That was the moment I realized she'd been lying to me every single day. She was using me, manipulating me, lying about her feelings, all while she was in bed with her boss, trying to bleed me dry. I started to feel something I never expected, disgust. Not just at her, but at myself for not seeing it sooner. How could I let myself be so blind? How could I trust someone who so easily betrayed me? I had to accept that I was dealing with a person who was willing to destroy everything for her own selfish ends. That realization made me more determined than ever to fight her legally and emotionally. The courtroom sessions were intense. Lisa's side painted her as the victim, claiming she'd only forged the deed because she was desperate, and that her affair was just a mistake caused by stress. Her lawyer argued that she deserved half the house because she'd contributed to our life in her own way. I couldn't believe how warped her version of reality was. I had to sit through endless accusations, lies, and distortions, all designed to turn the judge against me. But I had my own evidence and I made sure it was seen. Even outside the courtroom, the tension was unbearable. Lisa continued her manipulative games, trying to sway friends and family with her sob stories, claiming I was an unfaithful, controlling husband who was trying to cheat her out of her rightful share. But I knew the truth. I knew she was the one who'd betrayed me, who'd forged my signature, who'd been screwing Mark behind my back. Every lie she told made me more determined to expose her. Meanwhile, I was also dealing with the fallout from her accusations. Friends who had once trusted her started questioning her integrity. Some even reached out to me privately, admitting they had doubts about her stories. It was a small comfort, but it helped me realize I wasn't alone in this mess. I was starting to see that the truth, no matter how ugly, would eventually come out. And I was holding on to that hope. But the worst part, the constant feeling of being powerless. I was fighting her legally, fighting her lies, fighting to keep what was rightfully mine. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and angry beyond words. I kept asking myself, how did it come to this? How did the woman I loved and trusted turn into someone so cold, so manipulative? I didn't have the answer. All I knew was I had to stay strong, keep fighting, and not let her ruin me entirely. I had to believe that truth and justice would prevail, no matter how long the battle took. The months dragged on and every day felt like a new battlefield. I was deep into the legal fight, but it became clear that Lisa wasn't just trying to steal the house. She was trying to dismantle everything I built. She hired her own lawyers, threw out accusations, and tried to paint me as the villain, an unfaithful, controlling husband who was trying to cheat her out of her fair share. I couldn't believe how far she was willing to go, all to cover up her lies and betrayal. I spent countless nights awake, reviewing every document, every piece of evidence, over and over. I had to get everything airtight. I'd learned that Lisa had been secretly transferring money, probably trying to hide assets or fund her schemes. I even got a forensic accountant involved, who confirmed there were suspicious transactions, large withdrawals, transfers to unknown accounts, all happening after she forged my signature. That was the smoking gun I needed. She was not only a liar but a thief. Emotionally, I was wrecked. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. It was like I'd been punched in the stomach every day. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I could have been so blind. I'd trusted her with every part of my life, our money, our future, our dreams, and she'd been secretly planning to take it all. The worst part was knowing she'd been lying to me, pretending to care while she was screwing around and scheming to steal my house and savings. One day, I finally got a court date. The judge listened to both sides, and I presented my evidence of her forgery, her affair, and the financial transactions. Lisa's lawyer tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, as a mutual mistake, but I had her own emails, her bank records, and the forged deed. I could see her losing her composure, her sneers replaced by frustration. When I made it clear how much she'd betrayed me, not just as a wife, but as a person I trusted. The courtroom was tense, but I felt a small sense of victory when the judge ordered Lisa to produce all the financial documents related to the house and her accounts. I knew this was only the beginning, but it was a step in the right direction. I also filed for divorce, knowing that emotionally I needed to start reclaiming my life. The thought of losing everything to her still haunted me, but I was determined to fight for what was rightfully mine. Meanwhile, Lisa's behavior grew more erratic. She started spreading rumors, claiming I'd been abusive or controlling, trying to turn friends and family against me. But I had my own allies, people who knew me well, who saw through her lies. Slowly, the truth was coming out. Some friends reached out, telling me they believed I was the victim in all of this. That gave me strength when I felt like giving up. The legal process was draining, but I kept telling myself I had to stay strong. I couldn't let her win. I was starting to see the bigger picture. This wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about standing up for myself, reclaiming my dignity, and exposing her lies. I knew I'd have to be patient, that the truth would come out in the end. I'd learned that people like Lisa don't change, but I also learned that I could survive. This if I kept fighting, if I stayed true to myself. And I would. The final few months were the hardest, but also the most revealing. After all the court hearings, the subpoenas, and the evidence piling up, it became clear that Lisa's house of cards was starting to collapse. The forensic accountant's report exposed her financial manipulations, and her attempts to spin her affair as stress-related only made her look more desperate. The judge was not swayed by her tears or her fake apologies. In the end, she was found guilty of forgery, fraud, and breach of trust. I remember the day the court finally ruled. It wasn't just about the house anymore, it was about justice. The judge ordered her to return the deed, pay restitution for the money she'd stolen, and cease all claims to the property. She was furious, screaming and crying as she realized her plans were unraveling. I sat there, exhausted but relieved, knowing I had fought tooth and nail for my future. Getting through the aftermath was a different kind of challenge. The house was returned to me, and I started the slow process of rebuilding my life. I moved out of the house. She tried to steal, and I focused on healing. I cut ties with most of her friends, those who believed her lies, and leaned on the few who believed in me. It wasn't easy, and I still had scars, but I was finally free from her manipulation. Looking back, I realize I learned some crucial lessons. Trust is fragile, and you have to guard it fiercely. Never ignore the small signs of trouble. They're often clues to something much worse. And most importantly, no matter how much you love someone, you have to be prepared for the possibility that they might betray you. You have to stand your ground, gather evidence, and fight for what's right. Because if you don't, you risk losing everything: your home, your money, your peace of mind, and your dignity. Now I'm rebuilding my life slowly but surely. I work on myself, focus on my future, and remind myself that I survived the worst betrayal I could imagine. I've learned not to trust blindly but to be cautious, yet still hopeful, and I know deep down that I'll be okay, because I fought for myself and I refuse to let her take that away from me. That's what true strength looks like.